Hi everyone and welcome to fan commentary on Beginnings Part 1 from Power Rangers SPD. Let me give you my thoughts on the opening. Originally when I first saw the series, I really didn't care about this opening so much. I don't know, it was just a really different take than standard PR, and for some reason it rubbed me wrong. And it took me a while to finally get used to. I don't know, it didn't feel like it fit the show. But then I eventually understood what they were going for, kind of a semi retro, semi cop show vibe. Now, I don't really say it this often, but SPD hit the gold mine on casting. I loved all the cast members from SPD. It's rare that I really feel connected to the characters from all the other ones. I do like all the seasons overall, whoever they cast, but certain seasons have this bond that works past just being actors and fun characters. Every little detail like clicked. I think that's why a lot of people love SPD so much and ignore some of the problems it has, especially Mr. Ball of Light, Sam, later on in the season. I really love the aspect of the aliens. Now, in Deca Ranger, the alien aspect was there, but it wasn't so prominent like what they did in SPD. Like, so many different alien designs, which were mostly unique to SPD. Almost nothing was taken from Deca Ranger except whenever they used footage directly. Of course, we get introduced to our three main leads, which I honestly like the SPD uniforms without their color palettes. I thought it was more kind of menacing that way, and I'm glad they put the detail to it instead of them being set up as Rangers, because it was, I always thought it was really cool that they were always the B squad, the squad that screwed up and was not perfect, because we don't need to have perfect people all the time. Now, this is where we continue the trend of the Rangers having superpowers. I never really understood why this became a thing. It made sense in Ninja Storm. Dino Thunder, okay, was a stretch, and then SPD it was story wise. It made, it worked into it. Overall, it wasn't necessary in general because they don't really get to use those powers. Sid, the most, never gets to use her iron fists. And I really hate it because Sky and Sid have really cool powers that would be useful in a lot of places, especially Z2. She has that cloning ability we'll see later. And that could have been used to get them out of so many issues. And because Deca Ranger never had these powers, we never see them used in Ranger form. I also like these really cool sidearms, which double as kind of semi shields, mini shields, flashlights, and their main blasters. I really wish they had released those as legacy lines because it's very rare that we get US props made for PR. And I think what clicked with me with SPD is that it was a cop show. I love when they bring in regular aspects of, civilian abilities, civilian organizations like in Lightspeed Rescue. One thing that I think SPD really nailed was the comedy. Now, some seasons like Dino Charge had the Rangers not do their comedy really well. It just fell flat. Somehow, SPD was able to get all this to work perfectly, especially Bridge, because he's the main comedy character. But all of them actually can do it whenever they feel like it. I also love that they framed SPD as a future season, not too far into the future, but future enough so that we have holograms, cool new designs of buildings and stuff, and of course, the simulator room, which pokes fun at our really fun character Boom, which honestly, I think this is Kelson Henderson's best role because he just has, that perfect, goofy nature of him. Also, I kind of find it interesting that in this, we know Boom is the one underneath that fighter, and he can actually fight pretty well, which is kind of like a reverse of his character. Oh, now speaking of, the look of SPD, I love this set. This is a huge improvement over past seasons, including Doggy Krugger's outfit. Now, Doggy Krugger is based off Doggy Krugger that's in Deca Ranger, and I really don't have a problem with Deca Ranger's outfit, even though, yes, it's way less detailed and more, kind of stuffed animal looking, because they don't have a lot of money and budget, and even the toy company did say that our Doggy Krugger was way better than theirs because, yeah, it looks more realistic and it's much more complicated because, you have to have a lot of animatronics and they put that effort into it, which I think sums up the entire season. This is the season that has effort put into it, which is thankful to Greg Arwanowitz. Speaking of him, if you read whoever signed on Boom's cast, you can actually see one of them is actually signed by Greg himself. I don't know why you would put an arm laser in your cast because a perfect example is that if you drop something and you're in pain and you flinch, you can shoot someone's face off. What's really nice is that for a pilot, which has to introduce a lot of things, they have time to do all these funny beats. And it works organically well because it sets up all the characters. You can see that Sky is very hard on people when they screw up. And it's the reason why he has a lot of issues with himself because he's trying to live up to his father, who was the former Red Ranger, which, again, I understand that point of view because your father was the best of the best of the best, like Krugger said, and which makes him be like, I have to be the best as him. I have to live up to him. And he doesn't want to have that, the image of him failing, or maybe it's just like, I can't look goofy in front of people. Now, the A Squad, I thought that was okay. I mean, granted, the suits are not amazing, which is kind of ironic because the B Squad are supposed to be the hand-me-down Rangers, but their suits are way better looking. But I don't really mind because, again, these guys are only seen this time and second to last episodes of the show. And plus, they have to kind of be looking menacing because that's what they're supposed to be later on. All the characters are their own characters, but every now and then you can see that they try to lean into some of the elements from Deca Ranger. Like Sid right there kind of acted like Umiko there because Umiko tends to go into tangents and talk about other things, which kind of got lost over the time of the season, which sucked because more and more Sid kept getting ignored, mainly because they kind of never adapted any episodes that really focused on Pink Ranger. They skipped those particular ones, unfortunately, because Umiko got a really good focus stuff, and it's just sad that it kind of got lost with Sid. And that's the only time we ever see the original ID badges, which uses the same photographs that they insert later in the Delta Morphers. Z's power, I think, is honestly the best because they never really say how many times she can multiply herself because she's basically multiple man, which in the Marvel comics, he can multiply himself hundreds, if not thousands of times and can control him. They really don't really delve into how many Z could. We could see, I think, 6 at most, I think we have ever seen. And it would be so useful, especially in her Ranger powers, to deal with certain monster situations. I also noticed that SPD's fighting style was more acrobatic. They would go for the flips, the spins, the more interaction with environmental items like tables, chairs. Like I love that particular stunt where they flip the entire table and kick it toward Bridge and Sky. Unfortunately, because of this, you could see the stunt doubles for Bridge and particularly Sky. They really can't hide it all the time. And I also like this Robin Hood-esque Z and Jack storyline because they were used to be criminals and they eventually turned good, which is completely different from Deca Ranger. All the Rangers in Deca Ranger were already part of SPD, and I think Bond was the only one who was not from Earth. He was on another branch of SPD, and he had come to Earth because they requested him. And I'm glad they didn't go in that route. They kept everything isolated, more grounded, and just wanted to show that even though they're doing something wrong, Jack and Z are still good people at heart. This is what creates that really love and hate relationship between Sky and Jack. And I really love this stuff because, I don't care about, the safety precautions, cabling, all this stuff. That's still a really, really difficult stunt. But I really enjoyed that relationship between Sky and Jack because it's just like he can't stand that Jack became the Red Ranger, and it's because of good reasons, because Sky was not ready for it, and Krugger knew that Jack didn't care what position he was in. He wanted to do it. He picked him because he's like, it doesn't matter to him that he's the leader. He just has that, that drive of being good. I should also point out, anytime we see the Delta Command Megazord base outside, that is actually the Japanese toy of the base. They didn't have the original Japanese prop that was used in Deca Ranger, so they just used the toy and did some filtering so that you couldn't really tell. But if you look closely, you can tell the obvious details. And they did take off some of the stickers so that it wouldn't make it obvious, but it's there. And they did a really good job, and there's no reason not to use the toy because it's fairly detailed on its own as long as you don't get too close and you don't pay attention to it. I wish we got a better look at all the consoles in the command room. The command room in SPD is totally different compared to Deca Ranger. Deca Ranger is way more brighter, more colorful. It has like stations for each of the Rangers, and they pretty much do their debriefing inside that room. While in SPD, the command room is mostly Cat's office, control room, and of course the commander's main control room, and the Rangers really don't work there. I do like that there's some like cool elements from other sci-fi shows, meaning like the center console is very Doctor Who-ish with all the hexagon designs and all those terminals and stuff. The only time we really ever get a good look at the consoles is really in the Sophie episode, which sucks because there's a ton of detail that goes into those places, and it would have been nice to see how they, how they worked, if they worked, or were they just controlled remotely behind the scenes. It sucks that the show over time couldn't show so many aliens, mainly because there's just not a lot of money to do it, and they don't have a lot of time. Even if they could make the aliens, they don't have a lot of time to put someone in complicated makeup and show them on screen because it's just like they only have so many weeks to shoot so many episodes. Because Power Rangers is filmed in like blocks. They would shoot, section here for this episode, section here for that episode. It's not a complete episode because they have footage that fills in all the gaps. So they can go through an entire year worth of work in only 5 months because they don't have to shoot that much. I also like the way Doggy Kruger teaches all the Rangers. He understands that the Rangers have their flaws and their issues, and there is a reason why he picked them because of their powers and their parents who worked at SPD. So there's a reason why they're all there, and he doesn't want them to go away. But at the same time, he does not berate them unless they go really far and stupid in areas. But he sees, okay, how does Sky think of the situation? And even though he's very honest, that's the reason why he's held back, is because the way he thinks. Because he just sees Sid and Bridge as weaker people because they do something stupid, they say funny comments, Bridge acts really dumb. He doesn't see them as equal to himself, so that's the reason why he doubts both of them. And that's his major flaw until, he has to break that out of him or he cannot become a leader. And that's the reason why Jack became the leader. And also all the issues from all the characters. Bridge has to become a better person. He has to understand his, stupidity has to be toned down, and he has to understand that what he's doing annoys a lot of people, which he, eventually figures out. Sid is the same way, although she was the easier one. She understood what she was doing. She was very bratty. Even though she had responsibilities, she still didn't really care. She took her position as, nonchalant. I don't have to worry about this. And all the characters did eventually, became better people. And I did like the way Jack ended his character. I think that's the reason why I enjoy these characters very much. It's just that everything clicked. Everything slotted into each other. We went from here to this conclusion. And it wasn't, the traditional happy-go-lucky PR conclusion where everything aligns and everyone has a fun day and ending day. That guy got blown up, and I feel sorry for him. But, like here, they're just acting completely stupid in the command room, and they wonder why they never become rangers in the traditional sense. I really like this introduction to the containment cards. Now, the containment card system is made for SPD only. And I thought it was cool. I mean, you could argue, okay, maybe it's a whole censorship thing, but it's like, no, I really believe that they just came up with a nice, interesting idea. I mean, it complicates certain things because in Deca Ranger, this doesn't exist. They blow up the monsters in every single way. That's the reason why if you ever see whenever they defeat a monster, it blows up and then the card comes out. And you're like, how does that work? But I thought, cool idea because the one thing that in Deca Ranger lacked was, okay, yeah, they have the judgment system and they can, judge people immediately right there. And that was really it. It didn't feel like a whole cop thing because there was no jail system. So the containment cards became SPD's jail. Now, the Delta Morpher does not have functional lights. Those were put in as a visual effect. They used the original Japanese toy, which has the guilty and innocent stickers available, and they have to digitally remove the top and bottom depending on which one, and then reinsert them later. If you pay attention and they go closer, you could see that they block out the innocent sticker on the bottom, and it's very obvious. Now, luckily, a couple of years ago, the artisan's version of the SP license actually made a physical electronic that actually worked with the guilty and innocent lights, which was really cool, and I wish they had done it in the original toy. The Delta Morpher, I thought it was a really nice design because I like morphers that don't attach to the to your wrists. It's very uncommon to have morphers that are handheld or buckles, whatnot. I like those more because they're more unique. I mean, they're not always perfect like the Mega Forces Morpher. I really didn't care for it. Even in Ghost Sager, the whole card system, I thought it was just eh. It was different, but I never really cared for the cards. But the Judgment mode and the Morph mode and the Call mode, I thought that was all really cool for SPD. Now, unfortunately, the US toy sucked of it because they took out Call mode. I also liked how the Morphers came with these, holsters where you can pull them out, kind of just like how you take out your ID badge from your pocket as a real cop. Now you may recognize the Jeep that Sid and Bridge are driving is actually a reuse of Dr. Oliver's Jeep from Dino Thunder. I wish they used these more often. And I'm kind of surprised they didn't go with the Japanese vehicles because maybe they think they were too little unique and they didn't fit the style of SPD, so they went with their own, or maybe it was just maybe too expensive to actually modify the cars what they did use and put it for ours. So they went with more simple designs, and they already had the Jeep from Dino Thunder, so I guess it was just faster. They unfortunately don't really use them that often, which kind of sucks because they were used a lot in Deca Ranger. Although it causes some continuity issues because in some backgrounds you can see the Deca Ranger vehicles. Like I said, the SPD fighting style is more acrobatic. They'll like to climb up stuff and jump around stuff, make them feel more like engaged. Which I like that they try to design each season with something different, some variation instead of everyone having the same styles because that could easily happen because they hire a lot of the same stunt people, so they have their very similar styles. So they try to make it, different and unique depending on which character they're portraying. What's funny is that in Deca Ranger, it took a really long time for them to finally explain how the judgment system worked. And it was just like, oh, it basically in that instant moment, a real judge and jury come in and listen to and then see the biometrics of the character, and that's how they decide guilty or innocence. Like I have always many different theories on how SPD was formed, and one of my personal theories is that thanks to a paradox of time force, SPD was born from it. So, and then SPD eventually evolved into Time Force. So it was like a completed loop paradox. So I always wondered because of the X Vault and the way they freeze the monsters in Time Force, did they think that wasn't a good idea or it had a flaw in the system? So, like, well, let's use confinement cards. So technically, confinement cards are a little bit more advanced than the freezing chamber in Time Force. So tech is a little bit wonky in that area. That's the drawback of having Time Force being set 1,000 years later, and sometimes tech looks a little bit more advanced. So that's what I always take away from SPD and Sky's father. But that's just one theory out of many. If you like my content, consider leaving a like and subscribing.